So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where you are in the world and when you're watching this recording. I am joined here by Neil, who I'm going to let him introduce himself in a second, and we're soon going to be joined by Nissar, who you may or may not remember a few years ago on Soco Films. We interviewed him with regards to his conversion to Christianity and the resultant Christophobic attacks that built up into an actual murder attempt, and the fact that he was driven out of his home city. I believe, from memory, it was up in Bradford, and is now an internally displaced person within the UK um, because of Muslim zealots who wanted to kill him just for him and his family for just making the choice of becoming a Christian. And we're going to be talking about a campaign which is called Legalize Apostasy, and Nissar is about to join us now. So in which case I'll get him straight on it, and he can read the opening psalm. We're just going to talk about that campaign in the light of the fact that we've now got a Labour government that is going to be seeking to make Islamophobia illegal, and the working definition of Islamophobia that they are working to is any sort of attack or critique of Muslimness, which I'm sure you can understand is a deeply troubling definition of the term Islamophobia. And so as Christians, we need to be talking about the other side of this coin, which is, the Muslims have made a great deal talking about Islamophobia, but we need to be talking about Christophobia. And Nissar, as you guys might remember from the time that we interviewed him, is someone who suffered that directly. So we're very glad to have you, Nissar. Good to see you. Glad you got your computer sorted out.
Yeah, good morning, and sorry, had a bit of a glitch there, so my apologies for the lateness.
No, that's we've
I've had
only
to.
just we've only just started, so don't worry.
Okay.
Nissar, while I'm going to ask Neil to introduce himself, do you just want to find a psalm that you're going to read for us as the opening prayer? And I'm going to ask you to read through the whole psalm as our opening prayers. But while you're just getting yourself together and
Yep,
getting a
thank you.
Bible, I'm going to ask Neil to introduce himself to everybody and explain what he's doing here.
Right, Bob, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, my background is largely military. My father was RAF, and I went into the military myself, into the army back in 1981. Both my brothers were in the army as well. And I spent 16 years as an intelligence corps officer. So I left in 97, came out, and then ended up working really across Central Asia and the Middle East for nearly 20 years, back and forwards there. So when I'd moved to the Middle East, I knew very little, sorry, to the Central Asia back in 97. I knew little about Islam, but I bought myself a Penguin Qur'an and I read that a couple of times living in Azerbaijan, in Baku. So I had an understanding of the culture, really, being interested in history and politics and all the rest of it because of my background. And basically, I studied it fairly regularly after that, not the Quran, but just Islam in general, with the issues that we were seeing, in Europe and the growing issues after Salman Rushdie and all the rest of it. I thought we should be more aware because of where I was living. And, in that time, I learned obviously about the apostasy laws, and I realized that, these were obviously murderous in their intent against Muslims, wherever they are, simply because of the nature of Islamic law and Sharia, obviously. And one day I saw Nissar talking on a video with Tommy Robinson, which had just popped up on my YouTube list, and that's when I got in contact with Nissar, and we spoke about it. And out of that came this Legalize Apostasy campaign, which is aiming to help, obviously Brits, who are ex-Muslims, live freely in this country, but also to, affect hopefully people in other places too, by demonstrating, that the apostasy laws need to be rescinded, reformed, whatever, from the point of view of those, if they are to match those of us living in the West and all the issues that, over the many generations we fought for to be free from these types of issues. So that's really my background, and I still, obviously help with Nissar today, and anyone else who we can help really in that regard.
Okay, thank you so much. Nissar, have you found a psalm you're going to read for us, our opening prayer?
I have, brother.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
If you just want to read it all the way through from beginning to end, and that'll be our opening prayer, and then we'll get into the meat of the conversation.
Yeah, so Psalm 91, Psalms are very dear to me, actually, but there are certain Psalms that spring out more than others, actually, which I could care to mention. But if we go to Psalm 91, and it reads thus: He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him I will trust. Surely He shall deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the perilous pestilence. He shall cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you shall take refuge. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. You shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, nor of the pestilence that works in darkness, nor the destruction that lays waste at noonday. 1,000 may fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. Only with your eyes shall you look and see the reward of the wicked. Because you have made the Lord, who is my refuge, even the Most High, your dwelling place. No evil shall befall you, nor shall any plague come near your dwelling, for He shall give you His angels charge over you, to keep you in all your ways. In their hands they shall bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. You shall tread upon the lion and the cobra, the young lion and the serpent you shall trample underfoot. Because He has set His love upon me, therefore I will deliver him. I will set him on high, because he has known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. Amen.
Those are the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So, Nissar, obviously, people will have encountered your story before, certainly on my channel, and also on Soco Films. But for the people that perhaps have not seen that video, could you give like a short summary version of what happened to you and its impact on you and upon your family? Not, we can't go into the full story, I know, but just like a short summary of it.
Yes, and as you say, if you go into it, I'll probably be here till midnight. But yeah, so I came to the Christian faith in '96, and if I backtrack before that, as you know, I'm born and raised in a place called Birmingham, and I settled in Bradford around about 1990, and I came to the Christian faith, sadly, through my brother's death. Iftikhar was 1 year younger than me, and this was the most profound, most painful experience of my life. And I converted to Christianity. I took a lot of comfort from, we've read Psalms there, but the Bible, and the words of Christ. And so we are now what you would say an apostate family, which the reference didn't register with me until a long, long time after. And in essence, we suffered what I term as Sharia enforcement. That is to say, apostasy enforcement by the Muslim community, the Pakistani community, my so-called own kind, but which I've never bought into. I'm a British subject, and so and we suffered terrible persecution over 2 addresses. Car torchings, car rammings, drive-by brickings, daily siege. They're there as soon as you open your door. They're loitering outside your house day and night. This constant anxiety, constant dread, constant threat of what next. We were forced to move out of our first home, where all the children were sort of born and growing up back in 2006. And then I appeared on a Dispatches documentary in 2008, and that seems to have evoked all sorts of emotions, Islamically speaking, Sharia style in 2006, and this culminated in quite a brutal attack on me in 2015, leaving me kneecapped and suffering a broken hand when I was trying to protect my head from being bludgeoned in. Thank goodness for those two Polish neighbours of mine, sort of 7, 8 doors up the road, who came to my aid. It was the fall, it was dark, but anyway, thank goodness for them. But when they did come to my saving aid, my saving grace, and these cowards fled. And following year, took me several months to get back on my feet. It was quite a debilitating injury to have. And we were escorted out of our home by 10 armed police, stating that our lives were in imminent danger and we couldn't stay where we were. And at that point, I had no choice but to leave not only my home for the second time, but the city of Bradford, which we love very much. Sadly, it's what Bradford has become, a hotbed of Islamism. And you have people like Nissar, who was my MP, so I wasn't going to get any kind of support from these people. It is a very sad state of affairs when the police that are meant to be there to protect you are actually working for these protected class of people, these Islamists and this community, so that they don't get labeled racist, Islamophobic, and fear another riot. Because as you know, in Bradford, there have been 2 previous riots. And so never thought a day would come, born and raised in this country, that myself and my family would be subjected to Sharia enforcement as though we were in the Middle East or in Pakistan. And if I can just say, had I been in Pakistan, one could accept their fate. But the saddest thing for us has been the failure across the board, including bishops, 4 bishops, past and present, and this one as well, who promotes open mosque days and all things Islamic. He speaks more as an imam than he does a leader of Christendom. And Justin Welby himself, in a chance encounter, also betrayed me, actually, and treated me with contempt while I was speaking to Bishop Josiah, the head of GAFCON. I believe they're the worldwide African church. He saw me speaking to him, jumped on the podium, pulled this man away from me. When I asked him to sort of engage with me because of the issues we're having, this was back in August 2014, about 14, 15 months before my attack, he dismissed me with contempt and just brushed me off and pulled this chappie and led him away. Obviously, reputation must succeed me. He knew who I was and didn't want me to have that conversation with Bishop Josiah. We were moved out by armed police, and we've been living in another part of the country, completely away from any Pakistani stroke Muslims, actually. And what can I say? We're sort of in hiding under the protection of police for nothing more than rejecting Islam and embracing Christianity.
So you're essentially an internally displaced person inside the UK.
Actually, Rob, that's a wonderful reference you used there. I often do use that reference, that we are refugees, or, like, as you say, internally displaced people in a country where I am born and raised, actually.
Neil, why do you think that you mentioned something, you talked about rescinding apostasy laws. Now, when you say that, obviously, you know, attempted murder is illegal, religious discrimination is supposed to be illegal. So when you're talking about rescinding apostasy laws, it sounds like you're saying that Muslims should rescind apostasy laws. Could you tell us a little bit more about the Make Apostacy Legal campaign? What are its objectives? What are its aims? And so on.
It's really rather simple in the end, isn't it? Because you say, if you're going to kill people for changing their religion, which is what, as you know, all the different codes of Sharia demand. So it doesn't matter if you're Sunni or Shia, major law schools or even minor law schools, as Yusuf al-Qaradawi stated, it's death. So that obviously is the opposite of what we believe in the West. And in particular, you know, the Genocide Convention came out in 1945 about protecting groups of people. Now, what's interesting is that one of our most famous human rights lawyers is a guy called Jeffrey Robertson, KC, and he runs a chambers called Doughty Chambers in London. And it's interesting because Keir Starmer was one of the partners there when it was established. Now, in 2012, Robertson wrote a book called Mullahs Without Mercy, and this was about Iran, and it was basically covering the execution of thousands of apostates. Basically, these were people who had left Islam to become communists. So they were then executed basically for being communists, but ones who said they had not been born in a Muslim family were not killed. Those that had been born in a Muslim family and had apostatized were then killed. About 3,000 of them, I think it was, plus. So he made the point that under the Genocide Convention, that people who left the religion that they'd been born into were protected. They were protected as part of the groups under Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. So what this meant was that the apostasy laws of Islam, which demand death for those who leave the religion, must be genocidal under that definition. So what you find is it's difficult to bring this up in terms of countries where, like ours, where you know they live and we all live together under common law. It may not be the de facto case, you know, in certain communities, but it's de jure under law. That is what we have, and that's the argument that I got when I wrote to one of the community ministers many years ago. And you get boilerplate stuff back from the political class, as you know. So there was no. They said, well, we're under British law. This is so fine, okay. That's, but you go and tell Nissar and his family that, you know, you go and tell all the other Muslims who, or ex-Muslims that you'll know as well, who left Islam and have real issues and have to hide from their families, from their communities because of issues like Nissar suffered. However, there are 11 countries around the world that openly state on their statute books that, you know, apostasy, the sentence for that is death. In other words, these countries, these 11 countries around the world, are quite openly stating that they have genocidal law codes which they will use against people who leave Islam. Well, naturally, shouldn't this be dealt with by the International Criminal Court? If you've got this open statement of a genocidal statute that's saying, you know, we will kill ex-Muslims, then how does that affect those people around the world who are looking at these countries? Well, you're going, well, it's a genocidal law code that they've got openly on the books. Now, as you know, rescinding or reforming laws in Islam is extremely difficult, to say the least, because there is the closing of the doors on interpretations. That, you know, 9th, 10th century movement to form the 5 law schools or the 8 law schools we have left, you know, but 5 major law schools, and that meant that there was no allowance within the law schools for reinterpretation of the old masters who'd given them these law codes. So that's the issue that Islam faces. However, you have to say that MBS in Mohammed bin Salman, I think it is, isn't it, in Saudi Arabia, the de facto ruler, is in fact talking about rescinding or negating many of the Sharia codes that rely on weak hadiths. And you're talking large numbers. So what we're obviously hoping is that with, you know, Saudi Arabia looking at these law codes, there may be this opportunity to see that the Islamic codes are a reformation, really, in terms of those laws and of Islam itself around what Mohammed bin Salman is talking about. So when you tie in the fact that these are genocidal law codes under the definitions of the Genocide Convention, as made clear by one of our greatest lawyers in that field, who was formerly in charge of the chambers where Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, worked as a partner, then you've got to say, what are these 11 law codes standing for in these 11 countries? Should they not all be taken down? Should not the International Criminal Court be dealing with it? When you look at, they're going after Netanyahu, they're going after the Hamas leader. So this will affect everybody, obviously, if they rescind those law codes. Because if everyone who wants to leave Islam can do so peacefully, not under threat, because under the Genocide Convention, it's not just killing people, it's causing them mental torture as well, mental suffering, which includes, of course, living under the threat of being killed. I would have thought myself.
Something that's happened with Nissar here in the UK.
Nissar in the UK. And you remember in Hartlepool, there was that murder just end of last year. One of the refugees who came over heard that one of the people he was sharing the house with in one of these multi-let places had left Islam and become a Christian as well, same as Nissar. So he attacked this man in the middle of the night in his room, stabbed him, but fortunately another of the occupants came to the aid of this fella, and they managed to throw that guy out. He then went on the street in Hartlepool, October last year, I think it was.
That's right.
He killed some old passing by pensioner. So, we've had murders, attempted murder of someone like Nissar very recently, which ended up in the murder of a pensioner in Hartlepool. And the individual has been put in prison now. I think it was just last month or something. Nissar maybe it was, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. That's right.
I think, it has an effect in this country. But what would happen to these communities if they were all allowed to, follow their own conscience, which is what supposedly we're supposed to be able to do in this country? So that's my issue. It's fairly straightforward, really.
I think in terms of one of the things that I find alarming is that as I've come to support more and more Christians who've come from a Muslim background, is the repetitiveness of the story of being driven out from where you live. I know at least 2 other Christian brothers and sisters who have had to leave their hometowns because of their conversion to the Christian faith, because they just don't feel safe where they are. And this was all under, it's not just a Labour problem. This has happened under Conservative governments as well. But it seems to smack that the liberal state and the liberal ideology has a blind spot about the antagonistic and deep-rooted prejudice against people who want to leave Islam, and also against Christians. I mean, a church that I know well, a Muslim travelled down just to smash up all their windows, and was arrested and said in court, "I hate Christians." And it's we've got an issue that our liberal elites don't want to recognise this festering boil that we've got within our society. So is the campaign, and I'll let either of you jump in on this, is the campaign Legalise Apostasy? It seems from Neil's description about changing international law where it's illegal to leave Islam, or is it also involved in supporting people who are leaving Islam in this country?
Yeah, it's to support people in this country. However, because of this issue that you get, as I said, where the communities minister said, "Oh, you live under British law here," you've got this de facto issue that, you might live under de jure under our British codes, but for Nissar and those other people that as well, and all over this country,
it's not being enforced.
We don't know how many won't leave it because they're frightened to leave. This is the other, of course. There may be millions of them. There may be only hundreds. Well, you and I will know that there are probably hundreds of thousands of them who might wish to change their mind. But so that's the issue that I see, is that yes, in this country we're trying to help them, but what we're doing is we're looking at it from the point of view being finding a good argument that we can put over to lawyers and say, well, here you are, the international laws in these countries, they're telling you that they are genocidal. Now, what they are is they are Islamic law codes, so they affect anyone under Islam. As you know, the law codes for Islam affect everybody around the globe. They will live under our laws, initially, and but the aim, as you know, for many of the Muslim leaders, in particular, that they should shake free of our law codes eventually, and either do a partition like you had with Pakistan and what is now Bangladesh, which was East and West Pakistan at one time,
Or in Nigeria.
or you eventually had to have the split in Sudan, South Sudan, North Sudan, to get this resolved. And the war in Sudan now is following on from an attempt to withdraw the apostasy laws. There were issues over the law code changes that the government were attempting, and following on from that, I'm not saying it's directly to do with this, but it's indicative of the problems that we face, when we have a community that sticks so fervently to a law code that is not the one that we live under, and that the Sikh people have to live under here, the Hindu people, we all get on together. But when you've got people who will attempt to break away in the future, possibly, this is not big, it's not unstated, is it? In fact, it's about submission of the whole country, has even been stated by people like Chowdhury and others. So the state is missing a trick in terms of dealing with this for all kinds of reasons. It might be vote reasons, it may be others, more personal. And so I think it needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed internationally, because it's not just us who are affected by this. You look at France, look at the issues that they have, Germany, it doesn't matter where you are in Europe now. And if you have a Muslim populace, then how strong is their belief in their law code? What are their thoughts? I mean, you can get a book called, what was it? I've got it up there, A Mosque in Munich, which looks back at the first mosque in Germany that was established back in the 1930s, I think it was. And it talks about the Muslim Brotherhood moving in there and, working as they do covertly as well as overtly to implement, Sharia, to implement the growth of the Muslim community in Europe. So, as an intelligence guy, I studied all of this, in my own time, because I'd left the military. As I said, I left in '97, and it's only in the last 25 years, 27 years really, that I've come to understand, Islam better. But I do study things deeply, and that's why I support.
One of the untold stories about the current conflict in Sudan, and the history is that you've got an 18-year jihad that was imposed from the north to Islamify the south, that resulted in the death of over 2 million Christians. You've got groups like the Janjaweed who continually raid into South Sudan, continuing to take Christian and animists as slaves to sell in Islamic slave markets in the north of Sudan. And the current conflict that you've mentioned that's now happening in the north of Sudan, because the Sudanese have tried to take a step back from Sharia law, because it's just been a disaster for them, is that the Christians of North Sudan are being driven out of North Sudan. There is a genocide, there is a cleansing of the growing Christian North Sudanese church. Nissar, I just want to come back to your experiences, because Neil's pointed out that our elites aren't dealing with it. I've mentioned that our elites aren't dealing with it. You mentioned three groups that failed to help you: the police, the politicians, and the bishops. Could you just give us a little bit of some examples of how each of these groups failed? You say one example of each, and how they failed you, in addition to what you've said already.
Well, it was very evident from the start, Bob, that when you have this onslaught against you, that you are perceived as the problem. And again, it became very
Who by?
obvious.
Sorry.
Sorry?
Who by? Who perceived you as the problem?
The police.
Go on. How did they make you feel that you were the problem?
Yeah, that one sergeant said to me, "Stop trying to be a crusader and leave your home. Go to another area." And in the words of another police officer, "You belong in a white middle class area. You don't belong here." And I said, "Hold on, is this not Britain? I'm free to live where I like." And so this is the kind of recurring sounds that you hear all the time. And there is this genuine alarm and terror alarm by the police, not to upset the Muslim community. And they also are cowed into this because you have the perpetrators and these people who are leaders, and there seems to be more leaders than anybody else in this community, that actually play into that fear by saying, well, the community is upset. He's upsetting the community. Well, so just for living as a Christian, prior to coming to Christianity, I'm still in the same home, same address. There was no issues prior. But all of a sudden now, as a Christian, and by the way, Bob, I didn't advertise this, as you full well know, it goes out like wildfire. So I had a very close Pakistani Brit who I thought was liberated and tolerant. He went out, they spurt it out everywhere. And before you know it, you're public enemy number one. Okay.
It's really important point to mention here, just to underscore it, is that when you were a Muslim in that area, there were no issues with anyone. You weren't upsetting the community.
Yeah.
You were only upsetting the community after your conversion.
Yes, 101%. There was never an issue. And the same could be said for the second part of our problems when we moved. We were forced to move from our first address, but there was never an issue. But all of a sudden, that you are now an issue, you are treated with contempt and that usual Islamic hatred. I was referred to as a Jew dog, in not such nice words. I had graffiti daubed, and if you see the documentary Unholy War that was aired September of 2008, this is a couple of years after we were forced out of our first address after being there for like 10, 11 years without any issues at all. There's graffiti daubed over all of the house and the walls and the windows, referring to me as a Jew dog. I've never known such twisted hatred. Okay. I went to the Bishop of Bradford. Well, I didn't go. I had his advisor, Philip Lewis, come to me with a journalist, actually. And I couldn't understand why he come to my home, okay, because I'd been appealing to these lots, the so-called established church, to support me and my family. That why were we suffering this kind of religious hatred for rejecting Islam? So they didn't want to touch me with a barge pole. But on this occasion, Philip Lewis, the then advisor, sees himself as a bit of an academic, and I think he was lecturing peace studies at Bradford University, came to my home with a journalist. And and then one of the absurd questions he asked me was, how did the community find out? And I took offense to that, actually. And I said to him, who cares how the community found out? It's a free country, isn't it? And the seasoned journalist from the Bradford Telegraph and Argus gave him a very bizarre look. And then he then put his notepad and paper, the pen down, and said, look, okay, I'm sorry. Let us use the bishop's office. Okay, so he arranged a meeting a few weeks later. I've gone along with a black pastor because I was at a predominantly black church at the time. One of my cars got written off outside church, and we were having all sorts of issues there. Anyway, back to this point. So we go into this meeting, and this bishop, David James, has a real go at me. What do you come to me for? You know, what do you want me to do? And also he expressed, you spoke about me in the papers, and I said, no, I just said that you knew my story. I had a chance to express to you sometime when you came as a new bishop to Bradford, that look, we're suffering these issues and we need your help and support. The journalist who was at the meeting turned around and said, I think Nissar sees you as a leader of Christendom, to which he looked very surprised, I must add. Then he said, would you welcome ex-Muslim Christian converts to the church? He said yes, and in the same breath he said, that is to say no, because we don't have the houses to look after them and the resources. And I was mortified. I was stumped. I couldn't believe what he just said. And the black pastor, Pastor Shaw, leapt to his feet and was furious with the man, waving his finger around almost in his face, and said, you know what? All you're fit for is appeasing Islam and the Muslim community, to which he didn't utter a word. So basically, I was sent away. And from David James, there's been another. You had
Is that
Nick
the bishop?
Bain,
David James.
the bishop, the then bishop.
Yeah.
You had David Smith at the time, didn't want to help, an older fella. You then had this David James. Then you had the flamboyant Nick Baines, who I've got to turn the Radio 4 of slot off when I hear him speak. And he goes to frontline here and frontline there. But yet I was on his doorstep, literally 5 minutes brisk drive away from the bishop's palace. They didn't even look at us, actually. And this current one, Toby Howarth. If you look up Toby Howarth online, you'll see he promotes. He wants his flock, and he openly promotes open mosque days and how they should go to their local mosque. And he turned his back on me as well, who's a newly arrived bishop. And when he was asked to make a statement, he was pushed to making a statement against the terrible issues that we went through, but he wouldn't read these statements. And of course, as I expressed to you about Justin Welby, it is an appalling failure. I've come to know these people as politically correct, cowardly lot who just will not stand up for ex-Muslims because they desire interfaith, they desire Muslim dialogue and friendship, and they don't. So they played Russian roulette with our lives. The police signed our death warrant, and the government, and you appreciate Naz Shah. Before Naz Shah, I had the appalling George Galloway as my MP. He stepped in after Marsha Singh's death. That gentleman was very empathetic, tried to support me, but he fell ill not long afterwards and sadly passed on. Then Galloway stepped in, actually, on the proviso of Palestine, and Kashmir, which is very much close to the hearts of the average Pakistani. The conflict in Kashmir with the Indian government there. And of course, he treated me with contempt as well, turned his back on me. And then,
as in what way? He didn't want to talk to you, or he didn't correspond with you,
or I've got to express, Bob. He is a Muslim. He cleverly plays it both ways. So to the
I've heard him say, just so you know, I've heard him say publicly that he's a Catholic. So who knows what religion he is, to be honest.
Well, I can assure you from the people, those people that didn't know me as a Christian in the school playground, when he was canvassing and campaigning, they were telling me, he's a Muslim brother, he's coming to our mosques, and he's campaigning. He's married to a Muslim lady. Unless she's converted to Catholicism, then I take back my words. But I can assure you that when he stands there, Assalamu alaikum, peace be unto you. And in my daughter's sixth form forum, when he was invited, soon after he was elected as MP for Bradford West, I went along to that school accompanied with my daughter, a 16-year-old daughter at the time, and he was making statements to the fact that he was going to go around to the Pakistani shopkeepers who were selling Israeli produce and get them to stop. He's a bigoted, intolerant man, and he despises Israel. And when at question time, when I popped my hand up, and because he was alluding to the fact there are all sorts of social issues with the Pakistani community, and how he used some reference about how Jews had moved out of a certain area, had bettered themselves, blah, 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 blah. And in a similar vein, the Pakistani community are experiencing social issues. They lack jobs. They lack all these opportunities. So I refuted that, and I said, look, why is it you're saying that they're victims in a respect, but we are victims because we are suffering this appalling religious persecution as a convert Christian family. And honestly, Bob, if looks could kill, I'd be a dead man. And he said to me, why aren't the police doing anything about it? And I said, I've been to the police, they refuse to do anything, and we are left on our own, basically. The bishops have failed us as well. They're not tackling this. They're not raising this issue. Come and speak to me, he said. And anyway, so I approached him afterwards. He saw me approaching him. He turned his back on me. He made me wait, and I still persisted. And I approached him, and I said, okay, when can I meet with you? He said, quite abruptly, call my office. And you know what? I'm not born yesterday, Bob. You get to know what's what. And look, you know, and I know, he enjoys all these bloc Muslim votes, as they do, like Naz Shah, Sadiq Khan, with the wonderful liberals, assisting him. But it's a crying shame. And so I couldn't go to him. I knew the door was closed. And Naz Shah, I have it on record. Three appointments, consecutive appointments per consecutive week, were cancelled. And in the end, she didn't get back to me at all. The last email was that she said, I need to take advice. I outlined exactly what had happened, where we were coming from, what was going on. And so the last email was, I need to take advice, and she failed to get back to me. And so
what we've got here is, I mean, we've got examples of the media, the bishops, the police, and the politicians, all basically, essentially, either not wanting to help you, or not knowing how to help you, or just seeing. Just the problem is here's my analysis, and feel free to come back at me if you disagree or think it's something else. But I think particularly within the liberal elites, they whenever this problem rears its head in a way that they see it, they recognize that it is just a garden full of weeds, that they recognize that it is a river full of sludge, that it is a problem too big for them to fix. And so it is easier for them to just sideline people like the Holy Confessor Nissar and to put him to one side as if he's not important, or to try and shut him up, because it would cause them more problems if they were to try to fix this and to try to deal with it with any determination than it is to just throw you, Nissar, to the wolves. I mean, that's how it comes across to me. What do you two think? What's your analysis? Do you have a different analysis, or do you agree with my own?
No, I totally agree. I've expressed from the very beginning that there has been this reluctance, and that is born out of cowardice. And again, the police have been terrified because, again, 2 previous riots in Bradford They turned all the English businesses upside down in Manningham, all the way from sort of city centre. And this is exactly it, actually. So is it the case then I should bow down and subject myself to Sharia enforcement of Islam? It just goes against the grain, Bob. Where are our freedoms? Where are our democracy? You know, no, you're 100% right. Your analysis is quite right. Can I just say, to be fair, the Bradford Telegraph and Argus, the regional local paper, they did do 3 or 4 stories on us, actually. So
Right.
it's there. It's there.
Yeah.
And so, but you appreciate the malevolent MP Galloway and Shah. I mean, when we were having to be taken away by armed police in November of 2016, she was interviewed on Calendar News, and she had a very, very serious looking face, and she didn't want to be there, but she was pushed to be there, I should imagine. And she evaded all the issues, brushed it on the carpet, was going to meet with the police. It's all lip service, okay? This country, it's a failure of the state. It's as simple as that. It's a failure of the state.
What would you like to? What's your thoughts on my analysis of why this issue is not getting dealt with?
Yeah, I agree with you that it is a big problem. It's undoubtedly one across Europe, across the West. As you know, under Islamic law, Muslims were not meant to live permanently in non-Muslim states under non-Islamic leadership.
Yeah.
So this is rather like a unique situation that the West is facing now, where they are seen to be as a means of entry to the West for the Sharia enforcer leadership, in terms of looking at, and they've stated this many times, you all know, about eventually seeing Europe becoming Islamized. This is what Muslims have said themselves. You can read many of the quotes from leaders who've done this from Algeria, Libya, and other states. So if that is the case, it's indicating that they do see that as their goal amongst those groups. And that is what is underway, because obviously, if they're not meant to live under here, they're here for a reason then. And they're being, which is what I was saying about that mosque in Munich. So we have a form of entryism, you might say, by the Muslim Brotherhood, led by them in terms of longer term. These are real strategists, unlike ours in the West, who are looking down, a month away, 2 months away, short-term thinking. What has been lost is the understanding of the strategic issues, which is why we've handed over our industries for China, for instance, and we are becoming, beggared as a nation. The issues that we face in the West in terms of our industries are indicative of strategic thinking that is poor, and it's obviously the same with this. So the avoidance of the issue is because the people are short-term thinkers and do not wish to address these thorny issues. And we don't have a Winston Churchill talking about it. We don't have a Charles de Gaulle coming to save us, etc. What do we have? Fortunately, we've got a Nigel Farage trying to change things in terms of how the system operates, and that it becomes more receptive to what the people want. That could take many years yet. But the issue that we've got now is that they're not listening to the people who have these concerns from the bottom up, and they are forcing the people through use of hate laws, etc., speech laws. But the hate laws include apostates, believe it or not. Since 2007, and Nissar has never seen those laws used once to protect
No.
Not any other apostate that we know of. And so for the last, whatever it is now, 17 years, apostates are supposed to be protected by these laws. They've never been used, but you'll see thousands of cases of other groups, particularly Muslims, being protected under these laws, but you'll never see Nissar on the books or any other. I've never seen any. So yeah, there is a real issue, but the laws are being applied. There's a famous old Italian saying, we apply the laws to our enemies and we interpret them for our friends. That's where we're at. We've got the laws and they're not being applied.
I definitely think that that is happening, that we have within the state, you know, that we talk about the long march of cultural Marxists within the institutions of the state. And I definitely believe that we've got to a point in the UK where we've got a two-tier legal system in which, or it's only just emerged. I don't want to, it's not like it's been there a long time.
No,
So
no.
it is still very reversible, but we've got the emergence of a now two-tier legal system in which, perfectly encapsulated in your nice Italian phrase, it's being applied to anyone who, and it's going to get worse when Labour passes this Islamophobia law. It's being applied to create a de facto blasphemy law that protects Islam and also protects Islam from criticism, and he's going to be used tactically and strategically to shut down elucidating and illuminating debate.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to examples like Nissar and other confessors of the faith, you know, who've left Islam, become Christians, the law is just absent. It's just not enforced. And I think at the core of it, it's because the liberal Enlightenment worldview that dominates our society and has done for hundreds of years just has a blind spot when it comes to Islam. And it has a blind spot because, as even the law that Labour is going to bring in, which defines Islamophobia as a form of racism, is that they conflate race and religion. And we know within the liberal mindset, the worst possible thing that you can be is a racist. And so, therefore, if they are saying that Islamophobia is racism, and critique against Islam or pushing back against Islamification, is construed as racism, then obviously the liberals don't want to do it. And I don't think that they are fully au fait with the history that you are, Neil, and myself, which is that there's been other examples in history, like in Iran, which is the example par excellence, where the left sided with the Islamists, and the Islamists used the left to achieve their agenda, and then at the appropriate time just got rid of the left. And the left wingers in this country just don't get that at all, that is their fate. They're being played, they're being used, and when they've been the foolish, when they've been the useful idiots, they'll be disposed of. They'll be one of the first to be disposed of, if they push Islamification too far.
Sorry, I was going to interject if I may, Bob. Look, I've been spelling out two-tier policing system for the last sort of 18 plus years, because this is what we've been through, experienced personally, this two-tier policing system. And of course, I've used this expression that they've made them a protected class, this community, the Pakistani community especially. And of course, if I can digress a little bit, Starmer has had this wonderful meeting with Sajid, Khan, Sadiq Khan, and has discussed, well, Sadiq Khan has obviously expressed the blasphemy law, which, of course, Starmer has had that conversation with him. So it's a frightening thought, actually. If we cast our mind back to the sexual grooming, look, the police didn't want to upset the Muslim community at that time, and feared a Muslim backlash, and they allowed hundreds of minors, thousands. That's right, to be raped and pillaged, and they turned a blind eye. And these poor parents, who are at their wits' ends, were lamenting to the police, and they were being threatened with arrest. So this is the kind of willful failure that I'm trying to talk about, but in the context of ex-Muslims. And of course, Bob, we know it's designed to instill fear. We've lived through fear. We've suffered this thing for donkey's years. And as you know, I still battle with all sorts of emotions. And I mean, 7 years later, we're still going through You know, the emotional and the sort of psychological damage. You know, it's just and it's all designed to say to the next contemplate next Muslim, beware. Okay, otherwise we're coming for you. How has this been allowed to happen in this great nation of ours? Do you get me? Like, we know that multiculturalism is a failure. Okay. And this community has just time, and it continues to run rampant. It's a hydra-headed monster. And these cowards are not dealing with it. And we have 80 Conservative MPs, my last count from what I heard, that have stepped down now. After they said prior to election, we're stepping down. They're coward because of Dennis Amos's murder. Do you get me? And so I genuinely fear for this country. I fear for the West. I've just come back from Sweden, Bob. I was with the Set My People Free organization, who highlight and have been campaigning for the last couple of decades about apostasy and blasphemy. And it's a similar situation there. All over, the people I engage with, they all get it, they understand. But these wonderful Swedish people, just like the British people, this this wonderful kindness of Western mindset has been taken full advantage of, and they get it, they understand. And I estimated with some of the people I was talking to, I said, you're probably about 8-10 years behind us, but it's coming, because they have terrible issues. Malmo, there's rapes going on there. There's a 57% increase of rapes since the refugees have landed currently. So it's, and I hold Nigel Farage in high esteem, because he gets it and he speaks out. But like Geert Wilders, he's a far right. So it's this, they've got to lose this Islamophobia, this word, and trash it in the bin where it belongs. And they've really now have got to turn this around, like you say, because we've only got a very short time to turn this thing around, because you wonder whether this Western civilization of ours is going to be lost, because we know.
You see, I'm not, when it comes to this particular issue, I'm not as convinced that Nigel Farage is as fully conversant with the dangers as lots of people say that he is. I think that he is a classical liberal. I think that he has the same blind spots as the other elites. And I am just not as convinced that he understands the existential danger, or is willing or is able to tackle it as he sounds like he is. And I think go on now.
Yeah, I think he's getting there, is what you might say. You know,
yeah. I would say so.
Let Neil, go on.
Yeah, I think Nigel is no fool, but he is in the political game, and he has to be able to say things that will not obviously bring the whole weight of the machinery against him.
Yeah.
So some people have to step forward, carefully towards their goal. And rather, as you might say, the Muslim Brotherhood types with their mosque in Munich that created this issue across Europe, you might say, that was the entry point for across Europe, across Germany in particular. Then you've got to look at how you work against that, obviously, prudently, so that you eventually get the power levers in your hand to deal with it. So on this issue, you go beyond the system that we have, where we have this elite, which is across the West, and a lot of them will be ignorant, decently ignorant, you might say. You and I, for all kinds of reasons, have studied this more deeply than the vast majority of people. We can see what the issues might be, but in particular, as I say, I address purely the apostasy issue because it's genocidal. And it's clear that it's genocidal. So with that, if Keir Starmer said, "Oh, Neil Pigtree, we want to deal with you because you said," I'd say, "Well, hang on a minute. It's your old boss, Mr. Starmer, who made the point that this is a genocidal issue." Okay, so one of the greatest QCs at KC now in this country has made this point. This is not Neil Pigtree making it. I'm talking about what your old boss said. prime minister. So this is the issue that you've got to look very carefully at how you address this and use, the correct approach. That means you can still make the point, and the point is that those are the issues that Nissar has to face in this country. It's not only this country; it's globally, because, as you know, Sharia. Hence, why they were not allowed in the past to settle in our country, because they would fall away from that. So the issue is for Islam to reform. Can it reform? That's the big issue. Now, the point is that we know that's extremely difficult. That's why I mentioned about Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia looking at that issue. So it's highly difficult and problematic, but the world is changing. So you've got to hold out the hope that someone like Salman can make this kind of thing happen. Can it happen? Probably not. But the bottom line is, the people need to be aware of the threat to Nissar in this country and others like him. And the way to do it is to draw attention to the fact that this is a real threat in these countries where they openly state these laws. And will they rescind them? No. So we have to make people like Keir Starmer and others who are willfully ignorant, you might say, or blissfully ignorant, you might say, one or the other, of these issues, and that they feel they're doing the right thing. But the bottom line is, you and I may know it's different. It is not the right thing. That they have to understand that Nissar here he is living in his house that he has to hide in, basically, away from the threat of these people in Britain, let alone the ones that Nissar and I know have been banged up in places like Mauritania for years, and then they get released and are immediately taken back into custody and held again for more years for being, apostate. Then eventually get to France, and then they live under threat in France, and they're chased around in France as well. So they get away from these countries and they come to the West where they believe they'll be safe, and they're not. So what is the West about? Is it about allowing genocide of ex-Muslims? The worst crime in our law book, or is it allowing them to get away with it around the world because it's the worst crime in their book is to leave the religion? This is what Keir Starmer and others need to understand.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, you've also, in addition to the examples we've aforementioned, you've also got Hatton Tash as well, who Islamists tried to kill in a terrorist attack in broad daylight in central London. The attacker was never captured. He's still on the loose, so we've still got a terrorist out there. The media didn't report the terrorist attack. I want to try and move our conversation forward a bit, because I think we've dwelt upon the problem and we've elucidated the problem very well. So we don't need to keep revisiting what the problem is. So tell us a little bit more about the campaign. Tell us about what kind of things you're doing. Tell us about how people can get involved, how people can support the campaign, and yeah, that's a question to either of you.
Well, maybe Nissar could come.
No, I'll let you. Go for it.
Sorry?
Yeah, please. I'll allow you to.
Yeah. Oh no. Well, the campaign is aiming, obviously, to inform people about the issue that we have, as a civilization, you might even say, with regards to these laws. And that means getting people to be made aware of it. That's the first thing, is when people understand that, that there is a death threat against all ex-Muslims. And although it might seem that it's only in those foreign nations, Nissar and others are an example of what we face. So what happens as the Muslim population grows in Britain and across Europe is people like Nissar get forced into smaller areas, don't they, away from those populated areas. So that's the issue, and we have to think that in long term, do we become two nations? Do we start to separate? Do you see separation? Do you see that happening? Secession of these Muslim areas? Do you see subjugation of other populations within those Muslim patches? And do we end up like India? India becomes India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh.
Or so Nigeria.
These are the issues.
Nigeria is an example of what you're talking about.
Exactly. And in fact, funnily enough, those 11 countries, part of one of them is Nigeria, but it's in the northern states of Nigeria that you have Sharia. and you have this issue. You don't have it to the south. And in fact, we built a lot of the problems for Nigeria because we favoured the Muslims in Nigeria when it was a colony. And that meant that they got more influence down south and in government in particular for the whole of the state. And that's what we handed over. And that is a large part of the problem that Nigerians face, unfortunately. So, yeah, we have to face up to the fact that we have to get people to understand it here. So spread the message. Yeah, we have the website, legalizeapostasy.com, which is being reworked at the moment. We're a threadbare organization. We're not multi-millionaire. So people can just spread the word, but the website is being reworked. Once it's all ready, then it will indicate what people can do, really, which is to, address this issue of a genocidal threat to these people abroad, the International Criminal Court.
So it seems to me that the first logical step is that we start to put political pressure on the establishment to challenge this issue and start getting creative campaigning. I think, to raise awareness. And obviously you can only do that if people get involved, and so I want to encourage people to get involved in this campaign. And then you can start doing the kind of street activism, the kind of petitioning, the protesting, the things that we would normally associate with civic political activism in your campaign. Have you got any petitions going at the moment, or any particular emphasis, or is it just about raising the profile of the organization to get this campaign off the ground?
Well, I think Nissar is, best place to be to present the case. So he's been, as he just said, to Sweden, and we've had other events. But of course, problem with a lot of these events, as you might say, is that they become contentious, and more contentious even than a Tommy Robinson, march, because of the nature, and of the people like Nissar being under threat directly in Britain right now. So you could hardly have a march led by 10, 15, 20, whatever, 100 ex-Muslims, because they're under threat.
You can if they're surrounded by 1,000 people willing to protect them.
Yeah, this is the issue. And at one time, you think about it, if you had all the veterans got together, all the bikers got together, or whatever, and started marching against this as an issue and supporting these ex-Muslims in those in those Muslim countries to get their laws changed to protect them there. But in doing so, we're actually supporting our own people here, aren't we?
Well, also the media just blacked out those giant marches. There were huge marches in London. I remember there were absolutely ginormous marches in London, and no one heard about them because the media just decided to conspire to silence. So the whole thing didn't work, not because there wasn't the foothold, the actual people there, but because the media conspired not to let people know that the people felt that there was an issue. And this is how the media shepherd us. It's kind of like if you're 70 environmentalists blocking a road because it's the media's agenda to talk about the environment, suddenly you go to the top of the news agenda. But if 2,000, if 10,000, 11,000 or 20,000 people march against Islamic radicalism, if the media don't want, because that doesn't fit the agenda, the media doesn't magnify it, it doesn't present it on the media agenda at all. And so suddenly the people think, well, no one thinks that there's a problem with Islamification, but everybody thinks that there's a problem with the environment. And it's just how the media shepherd us and angle our attention to this or to that. I think I saw a tweet recently by Tommy Robinson. He highlighted that a Muslim mob had stormed a police station. And this had not been covered by the news. Now imagine if a right-wing mob had stormed a police station it'd be all over the world, but a Muslim mob storms a police station and the media aren't talking about it because it contradicts the narrative that they're trying to influence people with. So I think, we've talked about your campaign. You've mentioned your website again.
It's legalizeapostasy.com.
Legalizeapostasy.com. Is there any one thing that people who are watching this right now can do almost immediately to support this campaign? And if so, what would it be?
Nissar?
Well, we certainly it's one to raise awareness of course, Bob, because everybody who I've engaged with, if I can digress a little bit, that they are stumped. They've never come across the Western mindset has been duped. The Western nations have been duped because somehow this group of people, this community, they are the victims. They come out smelling of victimhood. When in actual fact, when people get to understand that, those of us who are apostates and reject Islam, we are, as Neil has pointed out, under this genocidal threat and the death threat. So it's one of raising awareness, but certainly I think we're very limited in the sense that people genuinely, we're very unique, Bob, in the sense, and my poor family, been dragged through this, of our, courage, really. And so it takes immense courage and an immense stance to, stand up for this thing. So getting back to your point, people are very welcome to come on board. We're very welcome to any suggestions. We need support. We're raising awareness. And can I also add to that is that we've had a couple of ex-Muslims through this have contacted, and we are looking after Bob. I'm not in a position when I myself have been signed off from work for over several years now. So, but it's evolving all the time, Bob. And so I could do a lot more, but it's just been personal situation for me to try and get over so many hurdles and obstacles with my family, my young family, who are now obviously young people. But we would really value any support, whether it's financial, whether it's just moral support, and those people that we can use to help other ex-Muslims, basically, because the two of the ex-Muslims that we're talking about have come away completely, just like me, from their usual sort of abode residences, and they've had to be relocated. They are near myself, and so there are all sorts of logistical, problems as well. You get me? And so it's a bit of a safe haven project as well to say to an ex-Muslim, look, we will support, we will help. Whether it's through some of the Christian contacts that I have, you appreciate, Bob, I'm not the most welcome person, and sadly, there's been a failure by Christians, and I'm not specifically pointing. Christians are very, very well-meaning, very decent people, but it's this word fear that people tend to sort of stay aloof and stay in the background, and we've got to overcome this fear.
Yeah, it is the fear of comfortable people that limits the ability of the church to do well in its calling to follow Christ. And it's because a lot of the leadership of the church are middle class. They are invested in the current system. And so anything that challenges the current system threatens their own comfortableness. And so they don't want to upset the cart. But I would want to encourage on the back of that, for Christian fellowships, for Christians to get the Legalize Apostasy campaign invited to your churches so that they can highlight this campaign, so that more people can get involved. So if you're watching this, do invite Legalize Apostasy to your church to speak to them. And also, it's something that I've said a lot. As you know, Nissar, I've got a lot of love for ex-Muslims. I often think that the reason why I evangelize Muslims is because I love them. And I know that Muslims who convert to Christianity make great Christians. And you're a perfect example of that. And, and churches need to be on the ball and to recognize that when someone leaves Islam, they need more support than just a meeting. They
have to
need
be that family.
They need a family. They need you to become their family. And it's getting the church to learn this, that Muslims aren't giving up their families, their communities, their homes, their partners, their children, their safety, just so that they can come to a Bible study on a Wednesday. That's not that's complete. That's a complete failing of what it is to be a Christian community and to live up to our Lord's teachings, which describes us as a family, describes us as a single body. And so the suffering Christian in any part of the world is the cause of every Christian around the world. And we absolutely should be motivated by this. And I think that maybe what might develop out of the legalize, apostasy campaign, but certainly somewhere we've got to build an infrastructure that Christians who leave Islam can be moved into an already existing infrastructure and network that immediately moves them out of danger, that moves them into a home, that helps them to find a family, that helps them to find a partner, that helps them to find a job. And there really is a need for such a charity, for such an infrastructure. And whether it develops out of you guys or whether someone else runs with that idea and makes it work. Because at the moment, I know that there are a lot of Christians doing a lot of good trying to support Christians from a Muslim background, but it's all reactive. It's all ad hoc and reactive ad hoc. There's so many possibilities that could just fail. So let's get ahead of the curve. Let's anticipate more Muslims becoming Christians, and let's develop the infrastructure to facilitate that transition. And do what we need to do to make that work. Your thoughts, guys?
I can't express to you in words, Bob, how lonely and arduous and painfully arduous this journey has been. And in a sense, it still continues to be so. Just because, I can't just put up my feet and sort of relax because of, because of my convictions, And so, and this is a very vital ministry. And yes, I've got to say, Bob, I'm very unique in that respect, and I hope there are others like me there. And because it's come at an immense sacrifice, a personal immense sacrifice, and I can't express to you again in words the toll it's taken on me personally and my wife and children, and what they've been through. Some of my children have been pulled out the day the police arrived. They were pulled out of their O-level exams. You get me? And so, they were. Then we had to leave Bradford. The existence that they knew all their lives had suddenly gone. And we're now hundreds of miles away. And we never had any support. One group of people I can mention is the Barnabas Fund, Patrick Sugdea, who I've known for very many years, and who didn't fail me when I appealed to him. And so I'm grateful for their support, but there's been failures along the way. Christian Institute, Christian Concern, again, fear. What I mean, doesn't it fit your narrative? I mean, why play it safe? That this needs to be screamed from the rooftops. That apostasy law should never be accepted, should never be allowed. And as Neil has mentioned about the hate crime bill or yourself, but apostasy has never been used. There's never been anybody brought to book for that. And so, just like the arranged marriage system, and I know it took decades for that to be taken note. They knew about it, but as per usual, the judiciary and the police, it took years and years and decades before it's now outlawed. So I'd like to see a day in my lifetime where ex-Muslims are protected, and anybody that if threatens them with their life or threatens them in general, they should be arrested and charged.
Absolutely. I'm sorry for jumping in, but that absolutely must be underlined, is that what we need is a political class that's willing to come down heavy on any attempt at intimidation or harassment of Christians who have left Islam. And you know, there's famous Muslim celebrities who are going out there, you know, trying to intimidate people, boasting of how there are thugs in the Islamic community and we can't control them. And it's kind of like the liberal state consistently, when it comes to, for example, you know, Muslim gangs roaming around Leicester trying to intimidate the Hindu community. The liberal state consistently goes, oh, we can't take a side. We've got to try and you know, think that everyone's as bad as one another, and therefore they completely sidestep the elephant in the room, which is that there is this consistent.
I mean, Bob, if I may say,
sorry, I just want to let Neil jump in.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Yeah, the Legalise Apostasy campaign is obviously the first place to look, but just look on YouTube and start looking at videos. Type in apostate, type in ex-Muslim. Start to learn about the issue that these people face and the law code, and do a bit of research. This is what people can do behind the scenes. And then on top of that, I read a book called One Vote Away, which covers the use of direct democracy. Because ultimately, we're not in control. Just as you said, the problem we've got is the state, as Nissar says, it's failing us, but it's not failing itself. Okay, it is run this way because the people in power want to keep us separated, want to keep us in the position we're in. So, as you said, the media is then run and gives the messages that the state will allow it to put out there, which is why videos disappear that they don't want out there, etc. So what I say in my book, One Vote Away, and people can listen to it for free on a website. So I'm not trying to make any money out of this. I'm just trying to inform you that you can listen to the book, and it explains how the power operates and the system that we live under and why we're powerless. But we can take control through using tools of direct democracy, and those, you see, Nigel Farage is backing that. So this is where you and your listeners and people can start to take control, because the average person out there is very concerned about what we're facing as a nation. But the powers that be do not. They do not wish us to live as we would like to live in our own nation. We must live as they've decided, as globalist backers, how we should live here. And that includes allowing in more of the problem that the people who believe in Sharia represent in terms of this threat to Nissar and his life. So there are two strings to this bow. The Legalise Apostasy campaign is the one that people need to think about in terms of addressing these law codes. But there's also, how do we actually take power? You know, how do we control events? And, you know, I've got people coming to me all the time because I work with a group called the Direct Democracy Movement, and they can go to our website, ddrightnow.com, for direct democracy, ddrightnow.com. And on there, you can see the plans that are laid out clearly for the people to run this country. And Nigel Farage backs this. Many other people back it. David Cameron even gave a speech about it in 2009, backing local and national referendum. But he obviously got a flea in his ear from the powers that be. You can't go around saying that to you. And that was the man who would be prime minister the following year, because he said this in 2009, desperate for power, putting out the message there to get support. So the people want control. They've not had it. This is why you've got the apathy. They understand that voting means nothing. Well, what happens if you were allowed to put forward referendum ideas, for instance, control of this or control of that, pulling out of this, pulling out of that organization, that's an international organization. All of these things could be put in place by having referenda, which is a system the Swiss have. And we don't have it. And how many people know about the Swiss system? Practically none. You will even hear MPs saying, oh, you know, well, this is what we've got, this is all we can have. No, it's not. Representative democracy is a form of democracy, and it's a con, because you hand over power to the representatives. But ultimately, we should have the final say if we wish to have it. That's what direct democracy gives you. You still maintain MPs, but they're there to our bidding. They're administrators, not governors. And this is the problem that we live under. As you said, the powers that be want or will allow certain press items to go out there because that's the people who own those press prints, and they're the ones who are interested in globalism. So we're stuck now as just another nation getting crushed under these people. And so that's the political angle. The decent angle is the fact that they're threatening to kill people like Nissar, and that's happening all over the world. So it's a matter of facing up to the realities of the world. As an intelligence man, I've looked at this for decades now, you know, and I've come to think, how do we get out of this hole we're in? And there are two strings to this bow: legalizing apostasy to deal with the Islamic issue, and part of that is also through direct democracy, where the people, whilst we still have the majority of the people in this country wanting our old freedoms and wondering why they're being taken away from us, why is Keir Starmer going to implement an Islamophobia law but not want to deal with the genocidal threat that the ICC could deal with? Will he support this? Will he support the campaign to take on these countries and say, you need to rescind those laws? Will Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, do that? Will he defend those people from genocide and a genocidal threat? Or is it more important to talk about Islamophobia in Britain?
I just want to, I'm going to unmute Nissar. Nissar, I had to mute you, bro, because there was some kind of noise coming from your microphone that was interfering with us being able to hear Neil. So I'm going to unmute you in case there's anything you want to say. Sorry about that, but it was just I couldn't hear Neil properly. So if you unmute, oh, it turns out I can't unmute you. You've got to unmute yourself.
Okay. Yeah. I thought you were just getting a bit fed up with me there.
No, it wasn't. It was just that while Neil was talking, there was noise coming from your microphone that was affecting things. I think.
Bizarre. Sorry. Yeah, forgive me, Bob. I just lose my sort of train of thought, and it's just how it is. But look, was it Rafe Halo Manku? I mean, he reeled off a load of stats. He's a historian. He's part Sikh, and his mother's part Polish, but she belongs to some noble established princess of some sort in Poland going back some time. I mean, how do you arrive at 30% of 16 to 24-year-olds, a third, want death for those who leave Islam? These are younger than some of my kids actually. Second stroke, third generation. Can you see, something is.
I do want to move, because we've dwelt on the problem, and right. I know the problem for you looms large on your horizon, but I want to try and move our conversation more towards our response and towards the educational response. I think we've got to reframe our current situation in the light of Christian history, because Europe has essentially been Christian for the greater part of its history, in the last 2,000 years. And certainly within the context of Islam, it has been entirely Christian up until very recently. And when I say very recently, I'm talking about less than 100 years. And the thing is, if we reframe all the kind of things that we're experiencing and that we're seeing, that we've elucidated and talked about, in the light of Christian history, it looks very different. And, I often say this to people, I want them to consider the fact that in the last 1,400 years, that there hasn't been a single year of the last 1,400 years where some Muslim army has not marched against some Christian population, crying out Allahu Akbar and raining down destruction and terror on a Christian population. Not 1 year in 1,400 years. And I think that that's worth considering, because what that tells us is that the kind of events that we're seeing with the Batley and Spen teacher, who's still in hiding after 3 years, Nissar Hussain, the other converts from Islam that we've referenced, Hatton Tash, and the murder of MPs, the murder of attempted murder of Christian converts in other parts of the UK, what's happening in France, Germany, the child rape gangs. It all looks different if you consider the consistent imperialist pattern that has emerged from the Muslim community over 1400 years. And it makes it look different, because you can't then say that it's just an oddball, that it's just a quack, that it's just some crazy guy who's doing it. It actually looks different when you frame it within history. And the problem with Europe, because of the liberal enlightenment, is that we are suffering from amnesia. We're suffering from amnesia. We don't remember the Barbary pirates. We don't remember the Ottoman Empire. We don't remember the fact that 7 centuries of Islamic violence before the Crusades. And this needs to be part of the educational program. Neil, you rose your hand.
Yeah, I think I thought about this some years ago when I first read The Reliance of the Traveller. You all know it. That's one of the great tomes of Islamic law. It's a Shafi manual of law.
Yeah.
But basically, you know, they all have very great similarities, different law codes. And I remember reading it, and I suddenly thought, as I'd worked my way through the whole thing, and I marked it up, and I understood, you know, that the Sharia is the foundation of the faith. As you know, it's the framework. It gives them the laws. And here I'm sitting with what is stated to be the greatest manual in Islamic law translated into English. It's a great piece of work in terms of, you know, you think that was written so long ago, and these law codes come to the, you know, decided upon back in the time of Alfred the Great. But that's when they were decided upon, but that's also when they became ossified. But that manual, you know, if you want to understand Islam, that's all you need to get. You get that manual and you read through that back to front, you understand what it is to be a Muslim leader. That this is what the demands are. It's a handbook for the caliph, isn't it? It's a handbook for the ulama. And it says to the caliph, you are to attack the borders every year. It's a seasonal event. You know, if you look at the history of India, it's this seasonal event of the Muslims, the Mughals, and all that, continually pressing outwards and taking, you know, warfare to the opposition. That is the requirement of a caliph under law. So, yeah, I'd say to all your listeners, you might spend 30 quid, 40 quid, whatever it is, but I would say read that manual. Yes, it's not the easiest to read, but it gives you the fact. This is what they believe. When they talk of Sharia, just read that one manual. And I think it might be educational if someone put their hand in their pocket who had a few bob to send it a copy to every single MP, for instance, and say, here you go. That's a manual of Islamic law. And I remember when I first read it, and I bought it off Amazon, the Amazon note on it said, you know, this is a manual that is studied by all the jurists, but is also a good guide for the concerned Muslim in any nation. And there you've got it in Arabic, approved by Al-Azhar University, as you know, the great Sunni university. And then it says in English opposite the Arabic. So you can read in English exactly, well translated, so that there's no need for language skills. There you are. You have it all in English. And for a few pounds, you can then understand Islam deeply.
And it mandates the oppression of Christians and Jews. It mandates the discrimination against Christians and Jews. It's a manual of Usul al-Fiqh and of the, as you say, the Shafi school. But you won't find that many contradictions from the other madhabs. And so, but the point that I would say, if anyone does decide to take Neil up on his offer, is just note carefully how it talks about how Christians and Jews should be treated, because it talks about, it makes them into second-class citizens. And note carefully how it talks about how Muslims should relate to non-Muslims, because again, it encodifies discrimination. So here we are with a Labour government that's going to try and ban Islamophobia. But if I were to critique the reliance of the traveller, which God willing one day I will do, or we were to point out, hey, we don't agree with being made second-class dhimmis in an Islamic state. If we challenge that, the current Islamophobia law and its definition that the Labour Party are working to would make such a critique possibly illegal. You know, it would make such a critique Islamophobic, because it would be an attack upon Muslimness. Well, what the hell's Muslimness? This is a really bad law, and I'm going to let Nissar in again. Nissar, I've had to mute you because there's something going on with your microphone and it's making noise even when you're not talking. But Nissar mentioned that we should destroy this term Islamophobia, and I actually think that, you know, there is a strong party that says we should just make the term, that just not recognize the term and not implement the term. But I am actually of the other opinion. I think the only way that we can destroy this Islamophobia agenda is actually to start talking more about Christophobia and flood the market and create parity in terms of the discourse in politics, you know, because everyone, when we talk about Islamophobia, is talking about prejudice, and sometimes it's not actually prejudice; it's just a critique against Islam towards Muslims, or you know. But I mean, and this law is talking about Muslimness, so that could be just critiquing the burqa. But the point is, they're completely silent about the fact that you've got examples like Nissar Hussain, Hatun Tash, the two people that Nissar Hussain referenced, the two people that I referenced, the people that you've referenced, Neil, and that's all happening in the UK, you know, and we're not talking about Christophobia. We're not talking about the fact that people came down to smash up the windows of a church or tear down a cross outside of a church in East London, or the fact that thousands of churches have been firebombed and attacked and graffitied in France, you know, or the fact that Christians were thrown overboard on one of these boats that was coming across the Mediterranean by Muslims. So when are we going to start talking about Christophobia? And I think that actually is our chief battering ram against the Islamophobia narrative. I'm going to unmute you, Nissar, unless you want to come in. Oh yeah, you unmute yourself. Yeah. No, we've lost it. There we go.
No, thank you. Yeah, if you kindly bear with me 1 second, if I may, I'll unplug. It was on charge. I'm wondering whether there's some interference with.
We've only got 10 minutes. We've only got a maximum of 10 minutes left anyway, Nissar. So we'll just bear with it. We'll just press through.
I mean, look, I think you're absolutely right. Excuse me. 100%. Christianophobia. We look, Bob. You're a prime example. You, John Sherwood, Hatu. There's many at Speaker's Corner. I've been there myself. I did miss you on one occasion. I did ring you to say, you know, I was here, and I just missed you. And I've seen the hostility there. I've seen, you know, we do have to raise this, and I'm, you know, you have my utmost respect for doing that, actually, and I admire you, because I'm a man after your own heart, and it does take a certain courage and a determination to, you know, fight for our Western civilization and our freedoms, you know, and yeah, so yes, definitely, 100% agreed, and I don't know why they've allowed this terminology. Well, they've given them credence, haven't they? You might know where it's from. I was told many years ago it's further to the Twin Towers. This word has sprung up, and of course it shuts down wherever it's come from. It's a clever way of shutting down free debate, and really homing in on Islam, and you know, sort of, and highlighting what is happening in the West. There isn't a day that goes by and I'm thinking, how has this been allowed to happen? How, you know, why is it been allowed to happen? But I can say, but from my experience, it is utter cowardice from the politicians, for fear of being labelled racist, Islamophobic, and it's happened time and countless times over years. So nobody's talking about it, and it has to be spoken about. It really does. And apology has to be acknowledged by police, well, government, of course, and acted upon by the authorities.
I just a small correction. I just want to state I'm fighting for the church. I'm fighting for a new Christendom. Like for me, the liberal Enlightenment was a mistake. It was a misstep. And I actually think that the liberal Enlightenment is actually at the heart of how we've ended up at the problems that we now face. And so I don't think doubling down on liberal secularism is going to help us. And I'll give you examples to that effect. So, I'm sorry, I'm just going to mute you again, Nissar. I don't know what's going on with your microphone, bro. I do apologize about this. So in terms of, when Nigeria became independent in the 1960s, the Christians in Nigeria weren't stupid. They knew exactly what the Islamists were going to try and do. And they knew that the Islamists were going to go for power, and they knew that the Islamists were going to go for Sharia law. And to counter that, the Nigerian Christians gambled all their chips on maintaining a liberal secular state. It failed. It failed in Pakistan. It's failing in Turkey. It's failed in Lebanon. It's failed in Iran. It's failed in Egypt. It's failing in France. It's failing in the UK. It's failing in Michigan, America. Liberal secularism has demonstrably failed in its ability to prevent Islamization. And so it is foolish of us to ignore history and then repeat the mistake. But there has been examples that have reversed Islamization. And these are all examples of Christendom. These are all examples of strong Christian nationalism, strong Christian identity. Islamization was reversed in Portugal, was reversed in Spain, was reversed in Sicily, was reversed in Greece, was reversed in Romania, was reversed in Serbia, was reversed in the Caucasus, was reversed in the Crimea, was reversed in Ethiopia. And so our choice is, do we try again with liberal secularism that is consistently failing, or do we return to a political narrative that actually has demonstrably reversed Islamization? And I would put it to us that actually we should abandon liberal secularism and we should embrace a Christendom and a political narrative that moves towards Christendom. I'll let one of you guys have the final say, and then we'll have to close this in prayer. So you want to unmute Nissar, and then it's whichever one of you wants to. A final word to each of you. What would be your final words?
No, I agree with what you said, Bob, and I come to understand that our Western democracy civilization is built on Judeo-Christianity, which is the bedrock of our Western civilization. So long may it continue.
Neil, what would be your final words? Yeah, well, being ex-military, I look at what is our coming, and do we wish it to remain on this path? We stood for something before, and now you can see that our hierarchy is failing us, and it does not represent the common man. It doesn't represent the thinking. You've got an elected group who got elected in because they didn't like the last lot. So this is the issue that we've got. And that's why we need the people to be reflective of that view. And that view supports people like Nissar. I can tell you that 100% from the many people I've spoken to, over the years. And it does not support the hierarchy and what it's doing to us. It's a sham. We need to change it. It needs change radically. And the people need to take control whilst they still can. And if not, you can see the day when it'll get very nasty indeed. That's what we're trying to avoid. But, it'll be what it'll be.
Okay. Thank you very much, guys. I just want to again encourage you, those of you that can, that have the time, the energy, and the resource, to get involved in supporting the Legalize Apostasy campaign. Do invite them to your fellowships, your churches. Do get to know them, get to know what they're trying to do, and let's try and get the church on the right footing, ahead of the curve, so that it's doing its duty to support Christians from a Muslim background and defending the rights of our neighbour, the ex-Muslims who are not Christians, but also need protection as well. We think of Ridvan, Apostate Prophet, and other ex-Muslims that we see on YouTube, and the people that they know. They need our support and protection, and we absolutely should help them. I'm going to close in a psalm, and that'll be our closing prayer to end this recording. And I just want to thank you both for your time and for the work that you've done, and for coming on and speaking about this really important topic. And whenever someone talks about Islamophobia, I want to encourage you to start talking about Christophobia and to start talking about the apostasy laws, and let's start talking about dimitude and the discrimination against Christians and Jews as a counter narrative to the Islamophobia narrative that's pushed for political reasons. So let us finish with a psalm. Psalm 2. Why do the heathen so furiously rage together? And why do the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth stand up, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. Let us break their bonds asunder and cast away their cords from us. He that dwelleth in heaven shall laugh them to scorn, and the Lord shall have them in derision. Then shall he speak unto them in his wrath, and vex them in his sore displeasure. Yet have I set my king upon my holy hill, Zion. I will preach the law, whereof the Lord hath said unto me, Thou art my son, this day I have begotten thee. Desire of me, and I shall give unto thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and unto the utmost part of the earth for thy possession. Thou shalt bruise them with the rod of iron, and break them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Be wise now, therefore, O ye kings, be learned, ye that judge of the earth. Serve the Lord in fear, and rejoice unto him with reverence. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and so ye perish from the right way. If his wrath be kindled, yea, but a little, blessed are all they that put their trust in him. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.